Good afternoon and welcome to Cold Chain Insights, the podcast that focuses everything temperature-controlled logistics for the pharmaceutical industry. My name's Thomas Hunt, and this week I'm delighted to be joined by Mark Talens, who's Executive Vice President, Chief Strategy Officer and Solutions Officer at Parkour SC. Mark, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure.
All
Good to have
good.
you on. I think a great place to start, if you could talk us maybe through a couple of your previous roles in the industry, because I know you were part of the pharma end user side for many years, and obviously your current role there at Parkour SC would be a good place to start.
No, thank you, and thanks for having me. As mentioned, I'm 25 years in the jobs, mostly indeed in the life sciences world with MSD, and then was responsible as well for the supply chain. Spin-off of Organon. Variety of roles, literally varying from market operations to global APS implementations, heading up the COE and running regions, and then had the opportunity to do the spin-off and then take over the operations organization for Organon. And that's also where I came into touch with Parkour SC, to be honest, as when you spin off a $6 billion company from a $60 billion company, you need to change something. And the assignment that I got from our executives was like, can you find something different with new technology? And here is where I met our CEO, Mahesh Varina, who said like, hey, Mark, I believe we can co-develop things. And that worked really well because one of my biggest frustrations, I will touch upon it obviously in the discussion, is the fragmentation of systems, which drives me nuts. Everything is vertically organized. Your logistics, your planning, your manufacturing, and supply chain tries to connect them horizontally. And that's what the endeavor of Parkour was all about. And we played around with it quite successfully, and then stepped over to this side, as especially with the arrival of AI, machine learning, probabilistics. It's kind of like, this is an interesting time where I can join my passion for supply chain and life sciences and learn a lot about this new arena of, I think, differentiation. So glad to be here.
Good. Summary, thank you. It's an interesting journey you've taken there. So what did that work inside Merck and Organon teach you about the real operational pain points that technology often overlooks? Because you've got an interesting oversight there.
Yeah, it is. Again, supply chain is known for its firefighting. And you would argue that a lot of people are very proud of their legacy. Like, hey, it's supply chain, we fix things, we get it done. But if you take one step back and you look at it, it's all reactive. It's like something happens and then you start. And then a lot of tribal knowledge, experience comes along, like, oh no, I know where to search for this. No, this is not real. And you're trying to get a lot of things organized. And then you realize the companies have invested a lot in their ERP systems. They have invested a lot in their verticals, like TMS for transport, MES for production scheduling, APS for planning, and I can go on and on. But what a lot of them don't have is that horizontalization. And this fragmentation is really what drives, I think, a missed opportunity and in general life sciences, because it is a connected world. You're not just transporting a cold chain product. You need to plan for it. You need to tie it up with the inventory, clinical trials. Those are all fragmented systems. So for me, that was the biggest frustration. And then, let's create a command center. Let's create a BI table. And in the essence, you still look at people that try to connect all these dots, and it's impossible. Like, imagine an average, I think, mid-sized pharma company, 5 to 10,000 SKUs, hundreds of markets where they operate in. How do you manage that? And that, I think, is the challenge that I think we need to solve for. That is the next, I think, frontier to success.
Okay. And how much of a challenge is it bringing in sort of new technology when they've got legacy platforms in place? You've mentioned ERP systems there, and they're obviously set in stone and very hard to switch and change away from.
Yeah, absolutely.
So is there a challenge in terms of integrating new technology into large pharma orgs at the moment, or how do you see that playing out?
It's a brilliant question. One of the things you want to be careful about, it's not about rip and replace. It's about, I think the magical work is augmentation. These systems are really good at what they do. The decision intelligence systems, the end-to-end systems of the future, and we'll focus obviously on cold chain in a minute, are not about the ripping and replacing old systems. They're utilizing elements of all the systems that they have, the devices, the logistics, the lanes, the TMS system, the inventory, the consumption of forecast. Imagine all of those. The systems are there. The data is there. It's all all available. How do you connect it? So it's not about replacing a TMS. It's not replacing your planning system. It's about like using the strengths and then augmenting it with the true end-to-end decision intelligence that sits on top. Because to your point, also we're looking at GXP compliance. We're looking at very difficult and complicated data sets. So the secret here isn't about replacing, it's about enhancing it.
Yeah. Okay, nice. And so let's get into the technology then. And so Parkour calls itself an AI native decision intelligence platform. In simple terms, what problem does it solve for pharma cold chain?
So what it solves is, and I'll give a couple of maybe analogies. That's the best way I think to describe it. You have a product, a clinical trial. Let's start with the most sensitive of everything. A clinical trial cold chain product that's underway. Patients are going into hospitals, into treatment centers and the clinical centers to get their injections, their immunotherapies done, fit for usage. Is the product going to arrive on time? Is it still going to be in range for the desired patient for utilization? You can't be reactive to that. You have to be proactive to it. That's, I think, one of the things we're trying to solve. Is there a port congestion? Is there a lane or route? Are there, for example, excursions occurring during the product that are still maybe within range, or there is a stability against it, which is for clinical trickier, obviously. That allows us, when the product arrives, to already have a disposition available or a risk analysis available for quality to keep going. So speed to decision is what we bring, clarity and unbiased, by not having to get out of 4 or 5 disparate systems data available, correlate them adequately, and make then a determination over, in the most obviously complicated ways, fit for usage, which is a very quality, but sometimes even, is the product available? What is the risk factor for a tender to be made? Is there a risk that the lane is congested? Should you reroute it? Should you change the mode of transportation? All of those elements is what we're striving to decide proactively and provide, I think, the company and the patients that they serve with advanced intelligence that they don't need to be reactive anymore. Remember the firefighting statement? They become orchestrators. So we try to transform the organization from reactive, fragmented firefighting to end-to-end correlated decision intelligence and orchestration. That's what we in essence do through our technology.
Yeah. Okay. And if you're sitting with a new client, and what's the current process that they're following, and where are the gaps that then you can come in with Parkour SC and fill? I'm just quite interested to understand this sort of the legacy systems are in place, or how things are currently being done, and where the real gap is in that process where you guys solve that problem.
So in essence, this is not about technology. Technology is an enabler. This is about business use outcomes. So what we normally do is either, again, we get invited to say like, hey, I have a problem. I've heard I'm getting overwhelmed. My teams, I need to do more, better, faster, or it's in especially in the clinical world and the cold chain, it's right first time, all the time, every time. I have issues in one of those aspects, and I've heard, and then what we go around, we break down that issue into what information do you need in order to manage that issue. Then we break it down, and normally it comes down to what I said earlier, like, well, we need a lot of data sources, we need a lot of business rules, and by the way, everybody has their opinion about it. And then I say, really? Or is there a way to actually logically make a decision? Because you're either there, both of them are, and I think the Merck statement, or like, if you serve your patients well, the profits will follow. If you still follow that principle around there as well, it's make sure the patients are cared of in the most profitable and an optimized way possible, obviously, because you also have a shareholder obligation around it. You break that down and you come to these use cases, and then you apply that to our technology, the data ingestion, the digital twin, and then the behavioral engine that drives these decisions. But the most important thing I just want to highlight here is nowadays you can't say like, we're not barging into a company at all and say like, hey, we'll solve world hunger. It's all about tangible 3-4 month sprints. Get to an outcome. Our platform is buildable anyhow. It's scalable. It's like your Lego block systems. And get them an outcome that from a business makes sense. Get them to trust. That's the other word I think we're going to touch upon several times today as well. Trust the system, that it does what it's supposed to do. And then you will see that we are going on to a sort of a co-journey together as we explore from a vertical to a horizontal supply chain, how that works. So it is a journey. It's not like here's the package. I'm not selling a book. We're selling an experience of an augmented decision intelligence unit.
So you're looking for some quick early wins, are you, in terms of some early implementations, quick early wins, and then building the platform out within the organization to add more value as you grow? Is that the process?
Yeah, in rudimentary form, you have like 10,000 SKUs. You don't want to tackle the 10,000 SKUs around the end-to-end ecosystem. You start with one plant, one product family, maybe one market, maybe one little problem area. What you do is be smart with the way your data setup is helping so that it's scalable at speed and as you expand. But yeah, the time also I think is gone that companies have budgets like, oh, I'll pay you X amount and over 4 years there's an ROI. No, they want real, direct, tangible. There's now the here and now. It becomes more and more important for companies like ours to deal with. And as you then come in, you prove yourself, you become partners as they explore the other use cases around it.
Yeah, I agree. Quite interesting. You mentioned digital twins there, and I was quite interested to get your opinion on them, because people are talking about them continuing in the industry, it seems. And what does a useful digital twin look like in your perspective, and how useful are they in sort of pharma supply chain, cold chains at the moment?
I think they're essential. And if you look at the complexity of the supply chains in pharma, where you have from API to the patient, multiple steps around an ecosystem of internal and external partners, a multitude of systems and data sources. If you see the complexity in planning and operations, planning, scheduling, imagine you need to run scenarios. Imagine you need to look at if certain variables change, what would an impact be? Those are incredible tasks. We have customers where they say like, I want to make a sort of a strategic assessment of my network. Where do my investments go? But what if this product goes up? What if I shut down this site? How would that propagate, and what would happen in my site? You don't want to do this either on static data. That's the other thing, static versus dynamic. You want to have real data, not just, oh, I can make 20,000 packs an hour. Okay, no, let's show what you reality have shown over the last. So our ingestion of data of all the operational systems of record, you connect them through entities into a knowledge graph, a contextual knowledge graph. And here's where the power comes in of a real digital twin, not just some static setup, a dynamic real-time twin that ingests data, positions it onto the digital twin, and from there you play around in a sort of an offline layer with your decision intelligence, and like, okay, here tender comes in. What would that do to these? What are my critical supply chains? That hurricane happens. In a hospital system, when will my critical materials run out? Currently, supply chain leaders across the globe have a hard time doing this. And as a result, they either mitigate through huge stock, which has a discard risk, or they start chasing with expedited orders, or actually not being able, and go into severe allocations. This digital twin is a powerful tool to check your reality versus your parameters. You can plan whatever you like. We all know this from supply chain. The moment you hit the plan button in any APS system is the moment you know all kinds of events are going to hit you. The digital twin that's built on your reality is going to show you what's real, what isn't real, and it allows you real time to play around with your outcomes and see what is a real intelligent answer to have. And now with agentic on top of that, you don't need to trigger these scenarios. Agents are there to trigger those scenarios and then feed them potentially back into your systems of record. And remember, we're not replacing those systems of record. We're just utilizing them and empowering them.
Okay, interesting. I mean, you talk about agentic and agents there, and it's I think it's a leap for some people within these businesses to take. And how do you convince pharma companies or 3PLs or your general customers you're talking to that AI can be trusted to make recommended decisions? How much do you think those systems are being trusted and used at the moment, or what's the gap?
Again, there are smart ways to do this. Obviously, in the world, I would never start obviously in asking like, oh, let's have an AI agent take over the batch disposition. Everybody will declare me crazy, and I would declare myself crazy, to be honest, if I would do such a thing. But is it so awkward to have an agent roam over your logistics network and look at deviations, categorize these deviations? So we always at Parkour say you have action recommendation and action automation. Even if you have action automation, you can still have, which is the other buzzword, human in the loop. There's a human in the loop element. Once when we delivered a certain automated recipe of decision making. We first started with a small group of SMEs inside that company saying like, hey, we'll give you what we recommend you to do. You then validate it. And after 4 or 5 times, they concurred with the decision. Then you can have a decision. It's like, hey, do you still want to look at that? Or do you now trust? So this goes about trust. This goes about the model not hallucinating. This goes about consistent responses. And in a lot of cases, I also will not deny, this is not true AI. It's a matter of real agentic workflow, rule-based workflow, but then at scale and at speed around it. And your decisions in the beginning, and this is the other, I think, big element that I want to highlight, don't boil the ocean. Don't make 20 variable complex decisions, because you and I can't follow it. If I throw 10,000 SKUs, 20 variables, and then like, AI, please solve for it, you will never know what it really did, because we cannot comprehend what it did. But if you tailor it down to a scope that you and I humanly can still think like, yeah, that makes sense, now you get trust in the AI. So for me, the choice and the real root behind AI adoption in life sciences is, don't start with the most GXP compliant cases. Don't start with throwing too many variables into play. Make it almost, and I'm can't, don't quote me literally on it. Start with an RPA on steroids, robotic process. Start there, play around with it, because the difference between an agent and this old one, it's not hard coded anymore. It is intuitive. Gain the trust, understand how it works and how it doesn't work. And that's also the journey where Parkour SC is on. Help the customer through that transformation. Because as I mentioned, this is not just about the tech. This is as much about the process and the confidence and the trust, especially when we're talking about life sciences, when we talk about cold chain, when we talk about products, vaccines that in essence get injected. You want to be sure that the decisions made are in line with all the procedures and compliance and quality always.
Yeah. And I guess one of the biggest challenges for you in terms of putting this into new organizations is that trust element. It's a change management piece, isn't it, in terms of getting new technology and then trusting it. So it's maybe similar to implementing, for example, a new ERP, MRP system where the members of staff have to sort of get used to a new change of working. And that's something that there are improvements down the road, but it can be quite painful to get to that point. And there's obviously skepticism, etc., within those organizations, and it's a challenge everyone's wrestling with, I presume.
Yeah. No, and I think that's true, and that's definitely what you see in it. Like, I think everybody wants AI. You can't just go around the day everything is AI. I'm sure you, like me, are working with LLM tools, public tools, which, by the way, is something also you want to be careful about. Be careful what you ask, because especially if you don't have AI and an LLM deployed inside of your own, technically it's taking it from the GDPR point of view. But if you the challenge is that you want to look at beyond those aspects, is figuring out what you want to do with AI. A lot of things are simple, complex rule sets. They're models. Yes, AI can work about it, and you see now as well the companies are clamping down. And like, I want AI, but by the way, you need to write a 20-page document to legal saying like you're not using AI, or why are you using AI? So at this point, there's like a sort of a two-way traffic. There, companies are afraid of AI unleashed. Let's call it that way. And on the other hand, they want to, because everybody understands the power of what this will hold. So I think it's the role of companies like ours to help navigate that in a way that the business is protected, people are protected, they're taken on the journey. Old-fashioned answer again. Take the people on the journey, don't let it happen to them. And I think that's it. So it's that old triangle about system, process, and people that still holds true for anything we try to do here. You force it through, eventually, yes, it will happen. There's no way, it's inevitable. But from a change management point of view and the trust element, again, I'll keep using it, it's key that we work together with the partners in the companies that want to explore how this is going.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. I think that's one of the big wrestling spots, and business like yours are critical for that, I think. Let's go on to cold chain, sort of visibility and risk, and probably falling back into your current role or maybe your previous ones. What's the most common blind spots you still see in pharma cold chain visibility, even with these modern tools?
I still think, and this goes back to the fragmentation, when we go like a track and trace, a device, yes, they're essential. They're a key component of the quality conditional aspect of any of those products. but it's just the logistics component. I think are a couple of the blind spots is the manufacturing process. You now see a lot more getting connected to the logistics process because, yeah, there is a cold chain inside of the manufacturing. But the moment the API gets mixed, the stability bucket starts counting. So time in refrigeration, time out refrigeration, connecting it then to the logistics component and predicting what remaining conditional bucket you still have at the time of arrival at the sell-in point to the market or the patient itself. For me, it's one of those things like a lot of people talk, oh, cold chain, you still talk about the logistics component. I would like to challenge that statement and say, no, you are no longer just a logistics component as part of transport. This is an end-to-end component all the way inside of the plant, the building management systems, connecting it to, yes, the logistics component, connecting it to the patient's requirements and the patient demand, and then driving it dynamically. I do think, I don't like to say it as a blind spot. It's an opportunity to really look beyond just the data about like a device, like, oh, it's been fit for use from a logistics perspective. Like, okay, but there's a lot more you can do nowadays.
Yeah, for sure. And I was quite interested to sort of hear your perspective on predictive intelligence, because if you look at excursions, for example, temperature excursions, what percentage do you believe is preventable using this new technology?
Well, preventable is one thing. And here comes my statement about noise cancellation. Let me take an example of a product, vaccines, that has been in the market for about 10, 15 years. So it's no longer new. There's long-standing information on the efficacy, but also on the robustness of such product. While it is a 2 to 8 degree term, the clinical studies have shown that it can sustain 15 hours at 10, 15 degrees, or sub-freeze is obviously always an issue with vaccines, so let's not go take that example now too much. But the temperature condition that we're measuring the supply chain again is still 2 to 8. The amount of times, even in my old world, I received product. When I was head of Brazil for supply chain, I got product out of Europe, and then it had a temperature excursion for 1.5 degrees. It went to 9.5 degrees for about 4 or 5 hours. The product sat there awaiting because the data had to be read out, had to move back to the site of origin, quality had to origin, and had to look at the stability data. And I knew that the stability data would suffice. Why would you not now look at these things and say, like, I know the excursion occurs during. Is it truly now an excursion, or is it something through workflow, through agentic, to an agent that can collect the data, has a proven, validated stability document that it reads it from, and then compares it not against 2 to 8, but judges immediately the event, well, not as noise, but not as something that impedes the quality of the product. I'm just making an example here.
Yeah.
For me, the time to decision, speed to decision, can change dramatically. The number of events that currently require 4 or 5 personas to deal with and has easily a week, sometimes even 10 days of delays, an order for a product. Imagine the risk you're running then on patients. Sometimes it sits at airports or ports in cold chain storage where you're hoping there's nothing going on with it as well. All of those kind of things and decisions can now be facilitated completely different. So I call those exceptions the noise cancellation. Why? Because the rules are clear. The variability is determinable. It's clear. It's black and white. It can or cannot be used. In another world of like logistics again, because again, we're here on the cold chain. The amount of time I've seen escalations and mode changes have occurred last minute. Oh, I need to change. Why? Well, the product is late. The product is late, but this is a product that has 3 months of stock in the inventory sitting. Yes, your on time in full metric shows late, but that doesn't mean you need to accelerate. Why? Because you still have enough cover in the inventory. The amount of times logistics, and I've been prone to that decision myself in my old life as well, that I've created an expedited shipment to the point that I chartered a plane to meet it. Well, in reality, if I would have correlated with other data sources, I would have found out that no, not needed. Or sometimes even the escalation and the change of mode from ocean to air destroys the PGM on the product. Is it even worth it? But you don't know that. These tools, like decision intelligence tools, tell you upfront if, for example, an ocean shipment of a product, of a generic level or a branded generic from like Belgium to Singapore, it needs to be air expedited. It would correlate it with the PGM, and it would have shown that the PGM becomes negative. Is it then still worthwhile the decision, knowing that there is inventory in the channel still? I'm not making the decision here, but the correlation of that data allows you, and I think even McKinsey came back, like individual fragmented events cause a digital bullwhip effect if they're not properly correlated. And this is what supply chain is all about, and this is what parkour is all about. Avoiding the noise, act where you need to act. Sense, decide, act. That's the new paradigm, but not in the silo anymore, in a horizontal.
Yeah, in terms of what you're saying makes perfect sense. I mean, you've got tolerance on the product, and when it comes out and it's had a 9.5 on an 8-degree product, but the tolerance is up to say 12, which is often internal data. Obviously, it's not publicly available, but companies know that. It makes no sense for me why that isn't already an automated release rather than going into quarantine, but obviously it's not. Having lived that world, why is that?
I think correlating data from disparate sources, real time, or in a way that can be trusted, is not something that we've been able to do a long time. Imagine the long old world. In order for me to use this data, I need to create a table where I need all the data to be first perfectly harmonized, data quality, data availability, data completeness. The modern tool sets can read agnostically from its source. Yes, validation protocol, you still need to have a very thorough CSV protocol. You still need to have a lot of protocols, and that's why I remember your earlier statements. I don't recommend to make automatic disposition decisions immediately, but there's nothing holding you back to start with the process about letting these modern twins and these modern tools look at your data, recommend actions and non-actions, and you see now the change coming through. Instead of a firefighter, your supply chain persona changed to an orchestrator. That's not something. So the tech is just one part of this. The process and the people and the roles and the organizational setup even can be challenged when you properly want to utilize this and get that speed to decision properly implemented. So I see a little bit of, we've been doing this for 20 years. This is the way, and it's working well. And let's also be honest, they can, so they are. There is a little bit of this is not just tech. A whole process needs to change, and especially when it comes to real disposition. That's why I like, start with the non-GXP. Please start with the non-GXP. There's tons you can do to already facilitate, get your ROIs on these things, but then move gradually into these, because there's where you unlock true value.
Yeah, and I presume you're always wrestling. I mean, different departments have different priorities, and qualities can be wrestling with commercial, and everyone's got a different perspective on things. And as you say, things have always been done a certain way for 20 years. Making that change when quality's on the line is often a sort of protracted conversation rather than something that can be made immediately. So it just needs educating, doesn't it? And trust, as you've fallen back on a few times there.
And I think you're spot on here. It's why would I touch something that's working and it's not my core problem area? When companies start seeing this as a differentiator, remember how shelf lives are becoming an issue, remaining shelf lives. Then do you really want to still spend 2 weeks in analyzing data that it's not that we're inventing data. Let me get this really clear. We'll still use validated existing systems of record data. It's just that we do it quicker, smarter, and correlated end to end, so unbiased. There's no political gain. There's no like, oh, I'm going to play this down because sales, I want more sales, or I want more volume out of the plant. No, you're basically unbiased your supply chain. So, but there is a change component here. This is that's something I think you just need to understand.
Yeah. Okay, good. Just moving on, we're obviously sort of moving ahead on the time here, I know, but in terms of the Merck and Organon story, you managed to reduce reliance on air freight and shift to ocean, which a lot of people are doing in the industry, and for a lot of departments, it's something they're certainly looking at for the obvious reasons. What made that possible in your experience, and what are things that others could learn from your experience there?
Well, first of all, obviously that was a huge team effort and not driven purely obviously by tech. This is to do with the balancing and understanding your supply chains, where you can afford with shelf life. What is the cost of holding inventory? It has to do sometimes with the MOQs in your rhythm wheels at your plants. Is it an internal plant, an external plant? But you start looking at also the cost of the products, and where do you want to win? Where do you want to more like hedge? That is a discussion that is not purely a supply chain domain. That is connecting manufacturing with supply chain, with commercial and the financial teams, and coming to what we say, like what I then called like a win agreement. Where is it that we want to win, and what are the conditions of the win we're willing to accept mutually? So that means sometimes we and then you realize that a company, like when you are more into the generics world, you can't afford flying things around. It just doesn't work. So you need to drag it down. But again, you're also dependent on your restrictions in supply, your contractual works. So finding that balance, finding that optimum is key. But there's a couple of real important considerations. And forget about my parkour. Forget this is now purely in the supply chain domain. Know that 90% of the damages occur in air freight. Ocean freight is so much more stable. Reefer containers versus an enviro container. I think every logistics specialist will tell you like which one they will prefer to do. So you have a cost element, you have a damage element. Now, if you're really good in planning, you can actually put the inventory on the ocean in transit as part of your in-transit stock and part of your work in progress, your safety stock consideration. Well, that requires you to have your forecast, but mostly to have your production rhythm wheels pretty well organized. But it is amazing how much you can do. And again, nowadays I don't need to tell you, well, again, a little bit with the ocean volatility now, it might be a little bit trickier again, but under normal conditions, it's a no-brainer where you want to go. So that is the focus. Stability, predictability, and cost efficiency is what you drove. And that was always the guardrail. But again, good collaboration. This is not too much about tools. This is about logic. If you always want to be just in time for everything, forget about ocean. If you carry, like most pharma companies that don't have direct to patient, but have a standard make to stock, you are amazed how much, because if you take in a country, you work through a distributor, you work through a pharmacy, and then to your patient. The distributor and so you carry in your own warehouse, let's say 2 months of stock. The distributor or the wholesaler sits on 4 weeks, let's call it. The pharmacy sits on another week, 2 weeks. So you have between 4 and 5 months of cover. And you still think you need to put everything on air? Think about that.
Yeah.
And remembering, here's where metrics come in, and I'll leave it at this. I'm passionate about this topic here. The measure of success of supply chain is driven off own time in full, selling into the wholesaler, for example. That same wholesaler that sits on 2 months, do they really care if we deliver a week late? I don't know. That's I think for the audience to answer. But if you are willing to answer those questions and have real discussions and not just look blindly at a metric, there's incredible value you can unlock. And now I'll tie it back to decision intelligence. You don't need to do that calculation manually anymore. You can have a DI tool sitting on top doing that dynamically for you.
Yeah, no, good. I agreed. And in terms of future outlook and sort of putting the crystal ball there, if you looked sort of 5 years ahead, for example, 3 to 5 years, let's say, what's the biggest shift in pharma supply chain and in decision making that you believe will happen?
Well, I think you're seeing, if you take the hype cycles, we're now in the world of, you can't go around the world AI anymore. So will AI take hold in the way we believe it will be? I think you'll see decision cycles being shortened. And if I look outside of technology, but and I think what's dear and near to all of us, the people aspects. And you've seen Gartner make that initial statements as well, that the current role sets and the definition sets are changing. Do you have in 5 years a site planner, a demand planner, an end-to-end planner, a logistics specialist, a QA specialist, a logistics specialist? Do you really, a fulfillment manager, do you really have them? Or will these roles morph because of the ability of the supply chains to no longer require specialists in each area, but more generalists, orchestrators? Because
What do you think the answer to that is? Do you think it will?
Well, I think the answer is yes, it will. Will it be fast? I don't think it will be fast, because you don't, like, changing a technology and a process of one thing, changing an organizational design of a 40,000 staff multinational is another thing. I do see it, and remember my earlier statements over start small. You will see these things starting from inside. I'm starting to no longer look at my device only. I want to look at my inventory at location, and I'm going to look at my manufacturing. Start connecting these, what I call Lego blocks. There's how I believe this change will happen, but it will happen. If not now, in a year from now, the technology has advanced. Even I'm astounded even inside of Parkour how the software development cycles are switching. We're Python code. Nobody codes. Code is being done. It's
Amazing.
being done. We can like recode. This is not about somebody coding. It's about interpretation. It's about, well, I think prompting is now the word that becomes
Managing your agents. That's what it is, isn't it?
managing that. Imagine that, transpose that on your ecosystem of supply chain. I don't have the answer, so I'm not sitting here with a crystal ball. I'm excited and fearful at the same time. But what I will tell you, change is coming.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
learn. So I think one statement I think is always core to make it: you will not be replaced by AI, but you will be challenged by the person who can utilize AI better than you do.
Yeah, no, good point. And I agree completely. So I know we're coming to the end here, but just Parkour. We sit down in 3 years' time. What's the business aspirations? What does it look like? And what do you want to have achieved?
In 3 years, and I think it's right, we want to be the trusted partner for life science and the high-end food and beverage companies to orchestrate their supply chains horizontally and be decision intelligence driven. Now, that can be at the end-to-end, but it can be applied to cold chain, that can be applied to planning, to inventory optimization. We see these three things: cold chain logistics as one core component, then the supply demand balancing as another, and the inventory optimization as a third setup. So we see us servicing the life science market as an anchor trusted partner to make sure that the patients are served in a compliant way, but in a horizontal way, not vertical.
Yeah. No, okay, good. People want to get in contact with you. Are you going to any events, any shows this year as a way to get in contact
absolutely.
with you online?
Yeah, obviously our website, we have our LinkedIn account, and always very open for conversations, and even just like these, like little virtual coffees, etc. Because we're all in this together. This is not about tech alone. We believe we have a strong enabler with it, but this is about coming together on the use case and the business.
Yeah, great. Okay, good. Well, look, we're out of time, and Mark, I really appreciate your time because it's been a brilliant conversation, and you've covered some topics in great detail. So thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me, and talk soon.
Yeah. So you've been listening to Cold Chain Insights. My name's Thomas Hunt. Please tune in next week for our next guest, and we look forward to seeing you then. Thank you.